Sunshine Week is an annual event that is so very important to people who care about informed consent and a democracy. If you want to have a society where we can make our own decisions collectively and come up with the best decisions, we really need to have freedom of information. What it allows for is that any citizen, anyone in the whole society, has the right to go in and get access to public information and public records. And you can look at the actual original source and make up your own mind. So in this time when misinformation and people are spinning things, the ability to go back to the ground, to the original fact point, to the information as presented, and to, for yourself, make up your own mind, or to share that information then with your community. This is how we ensure that we have a healthy democracy. So it's so fundamental that every year we try to celebrate Sunshine Week, and we hope that you'll join us.
And aloha. Welcome to our Sunshine Week panel discussion and engagement opportunity. I'm Sean Mclaughlin. I'm Executive Director for Access Humboldt. And this is part of something we try to do every year, is use Sunshine Week as a organizing principle, the notion that people's access to information, freedom of information, your ability to actually have the tools to get your hands on information and make use of it, to make a difference in your community, to hold public entities accountable, to inform yourself, to express your own views, is such a critical, fundamental underlying principle that obviously we work on all year, and so do many others in our community. So this is our chance to invite media people who are doing work to inform our communities to get together. And this year, we're starting with this session, which is going to be about how do folks see our what's the current state of our media in Humboldt County and in our region, and what are the challenges and opportunities happening now. And then we're going to have another session that'll be about inviting the same folks back to have a talk about how do we see the future unfolding? What do we think is next? But today we're really going to be focused on how does it look where we are right now, and what have we been through with the pandemic and so forth. How are people holding up? A little check-in with our local media. So Access Humboldt is really happy to host and support these kinds of convenings. And I'm going to turn it over to our excellent facilitator, moderator, Monique Harper-Desir. So take it away, Mo.
Yes, thank you so much for introing us, and for everyone joining us here virtually still somehow, but we figured that would be the safest bet. And you know, people that carry news and information are busy, so sometimes virtual meetings are best. So we're going to start today's panel just having everyone introduce yourselves. If you're here on behalf of a news entity or a news outlet, let us know who that is, and we'll just kind of start with that. And I'm going to pass it to Humboldt Hot Air to start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Narrowly, and I am here representing Humboldt Hot Air. So thanks so much for having me today. I'm excited to hear what you all have to say.
Well, I guess I'll go. My name's John Richmond. I'm the publisher and general manager of the Times Standard newspaper and timesstandard.com. I'm also the head of advertising sales for a division of local newspapers throughout Northern California called NorCal Community Media. And if it ends up having any bearing during the Q&A portion about media in general throughout our region, I'm also the former CEO of Lost Coast Communications, which is Lost Coast Outpost and 4 radio stations, if that comes up.
I'll take pity on Sean on the dead air. I'm Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, and I'm the Arts and Features editor of the North Coast Journal. And somewhere along this little setup of boxes. You'll see Thad Greenson is with me today. Anyway, we're both happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm Thad Greenson from the North Coast Journal. I'm the news editor, and very happy to be here. Very happy that Access Humboldt is hosting this forum and putting some light on Sunshine Week.
I'm Joseph Orozco. I am the lead producer of KEID Hoopa Tribal Radio, former manager. I'm on getting close to my last 6 months. I'll be retiring from this position and being more of a freelance type of a media person. Thank you.
Sweet. Mo, do you
All
want
right.
to?
I wasn't sure if you were going to introduce yourself, Sean.
Sorry. I thought I thought maybe I did that before the recording. I'm Sean Mclaughlin, Executive Director of Access Humboldt, and mostly observing and making sure it's entertaining. And I'm not doing a good job of avoiding dead air.
All right. So if we were to just give our listeners a snapshot of the media landscape of the North Coast from your perspective, what's something you might share? And maybe we can just go in the same order that we just did. Just unmute yourselves and speak.
Yeah, well, I'm really curious to hear what all of you guys have to say, because I think I'm probably one of like the newer people entering into the media world of Humboldt County. So but I guess what I've really noticed about it is just at least as far as the community's response to media has been really welcoming and really encouraging. And that's been really great to be a part of. And I feel like as I kind of started this little project and wasn't really sure what people were going to think of it and what we were doing. And I felt like a lot of people kind of turned to us and have been really welcoming us with open arms and really excited about what we're doing. So yeah, I would say that right now it feels like it's pretty welcoming and excited about new projects and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been fun for me.
So my assessment of the North Coast's current media landscape is kind of, well, I've only been here for 6 years, and before that, for almost 20 years, I worked in media in large markets. And one of the things that shocked me about Humboldt, and I think is fantastic, is that, you know, some might say that we have an overabundance of media sources for a market of this size. Matter of fact, I believe that Sean and Access Humboldt was part of or participated in a study with an international media group specifically around this issue. We have so much media. In fact, for our population, when I was running the radio stations, I was new to radio and I was sort of shocked by how competitive it was. And I did a listeners to radio tower count, LA versus Humboldt County. And in LA, there were something like 57,000 listeners per radio station. And in Humboldt, there were 4,000 listeners per radio station. So and that's just radio. We've got umpty newspapers and 2 of which are on this call. So the general community, I would say, is probably blessed for media here. And the quality for a small market is also just stellar. So overall, I'd say that the state of the North Coast's media is abundant and very healthy.
Well, I would agree that there's a lot of media, but there's not very many native-owned media. Hoopa Tribe has us, the radio station, and the 2 Rivers Tribune, which you can see on the logo of this presentation, is here. Very few. There's only 6 native radio stations in California. And we're the only 2 native media organizations in Humboldt County. as far as media organizations. There's a lot of newsletters type of things from different nonprofit agencies. But as other than that, there's too few of us. We've got to get, it's a strain getting everything out because, well, there's me and Ellie. So we need to grow a little bit more. Thank you.
Hey, Joseph, could you say a little bit about the pandemic and the fires and just in general, how have you kept it together during that, because particularly out in Hoopa, you're double impacted there with the fire events and so forth.
Well, thank goodness there's no fires now, but it's around the corner and we will always get the smoke. Just that the terrain, it just sucks the smoke into us. So we don't have to have a fire here. It just comes to us, the smoke. The Mclaughlin fire back in '99 is probably the worst that we've ever had. And as far as the smoke goes, it seems like it hasn't changed every summer since '99. It's always been inundated with smoke. COVID, we did pretty well in the COVID-19 in the very beginning. We had kept our numbers down. Everybody's wearing masks, everybody's washing hands. We did really well. Then comes this latest one, the Omicron, whatever it is. And that just that just hit us. So we've been noted by other Native media getting our stories about how we dealt with COVID-19 and got a lot of information out that way. But we're holding our own. I think we're doing okay. We're a small community. There's only about 4,000 people here, probably under that. And we're just hanging around. Very resilient people we are. Thank you.
I can't remember if I was next, but the vast variety of media outlets, John is not wrong about that. There's plenty of outlets, and we've got plenty of really great reporters, professional reporters, like full-time reporters, as well as a lot of people who are freelance and doing other things. So not just freelance reporters, but people who come out of other professional backgrounds and do occasional reporting. And we're really grateful to have them too, because it allows us a really broad background of contributors and a lot of different perspectives for that reason. I think we've got a tremendous well to draw from there, but we've also got a tremendous amount of news. We are not all necessarily chasing the same stories from what I can tell. And I am with Joseph on the feeling that we definitely need more BIPOC representation in our local media, including the difference between having freelance reporters or, staffers and having people in editorial positions, having people in ownership positions. That makes a big difference in the kind of coverage that you see and the kind of perspectives that come forth. I would like to see more of that from the landscape in general. And it's something that's a current mission of the journal. And going through the COVID era, I'll let Thad speak to that more, but we've adjusted and adapted. And if anything, that's made the need for a broader base of voices and broader coverage more clear to us. It's, if it seemed important before, it seems utterly vital to our survival now.
Yeah, I agree with I think much of what everybody has said to this point. We do have, I think we're blessed on the North Coast with a really deep well of media outlets of all types, much more so than our population certainly would justify. And I think we're, I think that's a direct representation of a community in Humboldt County that's really thirsty for news and really cares about the news, and is very willing to engage about it, all of which is wonderful. And and I would definitely agree with what Joseph and Jen have said as far as needing more diversity and representation in newsrooms and in ownership groups. Yeah, I think. Just from a breadth of media standpoint, the local media landscape is really rich. As far as COVID, and I think that like every industry, we have faced formidable challenges in adapting, both to from everything from decentralizing newsrooms and shifting to working primarily from home, to the financial impacts of COVID. And I think perhaps uniquely, I think we in media have had to try to find the balance of reporting on the pandemic and its impacts adequately, while also reporting on all of the other stuff that has continued as life has gone on. And I think I think that's been a really formidable challenge. And I think a lot of things over the last 2 years have gone underreported, necessarily, as newsrooms with limited resources have pivoted to trying to cover, something as vitally important as the pandemic.
Yes, thank you. A lot of really good points. I'm hearing basically that we have a rich media landscape, but perhaps it needs more diversity and more platforms for more voices. So the theme of Sunshine Week is freedom of information and the people's right to know. And I want to know, what that means to you all as you are carriers of information, as well as the importance of information sharing amongst rural communities.
Does someone else want to go first? I'm going to think about it a little bit longer.
So I thought about this for a little while. I even wrote a couple of notes down about it. But I guess to keep my answer as short as I can, to me, freedom of information means the right by the people, as enshrined in the Constitution and the Freedom of Information Act, to demand information of their governments in an effort to hold the powerful accountable. And without that, we lose our power over those who have power over us.
Yeah, okay, I'll go. Yeah, I would say I think freedom of information to me is the people having the right to know the information that is affects their community and affects them, and maybe not even specifically just them, but the people around them within their community. And I think I liked what you guys all were saying too about needing more representation. And I think it would be really great if the community could, instead of just having little outlets for each community, to have outlets that kind of cover everyone more, and being able to know about things that are happening in the different, because Humboldt is so big and there's so many different little communities within us. So being able to have access to all of it seems important too.
I don't know if I'm going out of order, but I'll jump in here. I think, absolutely, to me, just dovetailing on what John said, I think that, freedom of information to me very much means that, we, the people, have created our governments, and they exist to serve us. And they don't have the right or the ability to tell us what we should and shouldn't know, that their records are our records, and we should have unfettered access to them, because governments exist for the people.
I'll jump in on this. Freedom of information is actually mentioned in our Constitution as well, even though the federal government says, here's your Constitution. And when they formed us back in 1934 as a government, before then we weren't a government. And then in '88, we became a self-governance, but we didn't change the Constitution, which we need to tinker with quite a bit, I believe, because as I said, this was handed to us by the federal government. This is your constitution and bylaws, because at one point we were originally a business council. And you think, well, why would a government have bylaws? The Constitution, yes, but bylaws. All right. See, the BIA came here and they said, okay, you've got a bunch of resources here and we're going to help you do this business. So you have a business council and these are your bylaws. Well, we need to change our Constitution and bylaws, and it's just Constitution based upon the Freedom of Information Act and the rights of citizens. So this whole thing needs to be redrafted again. Now, okay, if Ellie was here, then you would have two Native people representing the same tribe. There's other tribes in Humboldt County that you don't see on this screen, and they don't have media. So they too have freedom of information. They should also have access to their tribal governments, documents, and information. But then again, you start talking about sharing and networking, as it was once said earlier, that kind of complicates things a bit for us anyway, but it's still federal government. We start saying we the people, and okay, does that mean everybody on a screen is the same? But from our perspective, or at least my opinion is that even when I get called to jury duty, I don't necessarily feel that I am that person's peer, because I don't know that person. I don't know their family. I don't know their background. As compared to how we are in our Native communities, if we're not related to somebody, we know who they are related to. And that's a completely different dynamic. So, well, yes, I could be that person's peer, but it's very difficult for me to sit in an American jurisprudence court and feel that I'm that person's peer. Something just popped in my mind there. So that all kind of blends into this freedom of information, and I don't know where I'm going right now, but that's I was trying to address that how it feels to me anyway. So I will cut it off right there. Thank you.
I'll just quickly say that the freedom of information is a primary a primary time suck at the Journal, because Thad spends most of his time filing paperwork for something that someone is refusing to give him. Either the police or the county or the city, somebody is refusing to hand over some sort of documents. And I have recently become kind of more horrified, amazed, and appreciative of the slog of that work, both in acquiring materials and also in digging through the massive, horrible piles of materials that agencies sometimes even purposely try to drown you in. And so, you know, it's something that not everybody sees. You know, it's a gross, behind the scenes, boring, time consuming thing that is absolutely going to be left out of every Hollywood movie about journalism while they're busy making female reporters sleep with sources. They leave out all the like slog work. And yeah, I am appreciative of all of the outlets that are really digging in this way, and of all the reporters that are just, you know, losing time and not seeing daylight working on those things.
Yes, indeed. And thanks, Joseph, for bringing up the point that not everyone's information is free to the same capacity, right? I think that's kind of what you were saying in your story. And I find that to hold some truth. So I'm wondering, what are some of the tools you all are using to help the communities you serve battle disinformation, or to help yourself find truthful sources to kind of maintain the integrity of the information that you are sharing?
I think for me, Humboldt Hot Air isn't actually doing any news right now. So I don't think that question necessarily applies to me. So I will let you all move forward. We have some talk shows and a lot of music right now is what we're doing. So yeah.
So I guess I would answer the question, by saying we're sticking to the traditional and rigorous standards of journalism that have always defined the Fourth Estate. Multiple sources, checking those sources against one another. They're going with the standard best practices that come with a degree in journalism. We're following the rules that were designed to make the Fourth Estate what it is, which is the people's trusted source for news and information. That's the simple answer to how we combat things like fake news and make sure that the information we're putting out into the communities is as true as it can be. To be honest, we are challenged now. Everyone in media, well, everyone in traditional media certainly is having to rejigger themselves as revenues, shrink more and more, or are diluted, or go to other places. That means trying to report on more with less, and that can really challenge us. Some of those very rigorous journalistic best practices, to quote my colleague at the NCJ, are a massive time suck. And when your reporters are tasked with putting out 2 stories a day of original local content, it can be tough for the few people that we have to go after as much information as is out there. It's one of the reasons why I'm grateful to live in a place that does have so much media, because if we miss it, the NCJ is going to grab it, or the Loco is going to grab it, or one of the radio stations will grab it, or one of the umpty zillion other media outlets. I almost wish, to Humboldt Hot Air's point, that we could all somehow coordinate everything all the time and be a single depot for everyone everywhere. I mean, that would be news heaven for me in Humboldt County. But yeah, the short answer is we rely on journalistic best practices that are over a century old to maintain.
Yeah, I would just second everything John said. And, I was taught in journalism school that if your mother says she loves you, call her friends and check it out. Verification is the name of the job. Multiple sources in every story, trying not to get just both sides of a story, but every side of a story, making sure you understand them and making sure those are checked against the facts. And so, different sides that maybe don't have, the same trustworthiness aren't given equal weight in the story. But I will also say that, as far as combating misinformation, it's never been harder. And we all have very limited staff resources. We want to put those staff resources toward reporting reporting news stories and telling people what they need to know. But with our content going out on multiple platforms, it makes it very easy for somebody who has not read a story to opine about it wildly, often with misinformation. And then we need to, decide whether we're going to put staff resources into responding to all those comments on, on an independent social media site. And those kinds of choices are difficult. And I'm not sure any of us have all the answers, but I think definitely, especially in the last 2 years, since the onset of the pandemic, the spread of disinformation is a really formidable challenge.
I would say that part of the problem with disinformation is it's now lucrative. And it's a whole other industry. And, we are, it would be silly to talk about it without talking about the fact that there are major media networks that are, in terms of viewership, in terms of reach, mainstream, that are pumping out disinformation. And we are beset with people who are working with that information like it's vetted, like it's just as valuable as anything else. And we are working with people reading the comments and not the story. It is hard to get busy people to read a whole story. But the comments, man, they keep coming. We have talked about a lot of things and to deal with that. We will go through and weed out people being insulting, people misbehaving, et cetera, but the danger of having misinformation up on your platform, whether it's your website or whether it's your social media on like Facebook comments or something like that, that is boosting their signal like nobody's business. And likewise, we have to be cautious about, letters to the editor, which, we always were, but now the consequences are literally life and death when it comes to, for example, COVID misinformation. There are issues of, the very fabric of our democracy is being rent by disinformation from a lot of different corners. And it is harder and harder to keep engagement and to keep connection with readers and allow, have that voice back and forth without, accidentally boosting really harmful and false messages. I can, live with people calling me names online all day long, but, seeing misinformation attached to an article, particularly about COVID, has been a real source of stress and extra work in trying to undo it.
Well, we keep our news information at a minimum because we don't have any news reporters. And my production, I try to reflect what's happening in the community, kind of leaning towards who's doing something good for us, especially from our community. And then I get curious about what other jurisdictions have influence on us, such as the race for the new district attorney. I need to find out who these people are and share that information locally. We do the live remote broadcast of every tribal council meeting, not necessarily all their special meetings or any of their committee meetings, but I try to keep the pulse of what's happening with the tribal council and the tribal departments, especially if there's some new thing that has to do, especially with the environment, the rivers, fires, Office of Emergency Services. We, in the medical field, we keep a good finger on the pulse on that. And that's their own doing. We just provide them the platform is basically what we do. So yeah, if we had 6 people and 3 of them were news people or 2 of them or 6 producers, we'd feel a lot better. I would anyway, but that's about where we stand.
Perfect. I want to welcome Brian. Thanks for joining us. I don't know if you want to take some time to introduce yourself, the organization you're with, and maybe reflect on what freedom of information means to you before we move on with some other questions.
Well, I finally figured out how to reconnect. I'm Brian Papstein. I'm with KINS is the primary one for this purpose. We have 4 radio stations and have been here in radio locally since 1957. So I guess I'm not only the gray hair in the crowd, but also the long tooth in the crowd. And certainly, as has been indicated already, lots of varying challenges and different pressures in the local scene over the years. one of the challenges that I see, in addition to what has been mentioned, is perspective. Whether it's vetted or not, it's all subject to interpretation. The interview show that I've done for, I guess it's almost 40 years next month, was predicated on not editing, not having anything be cut out or taken out of context, whether that means misinterpretation or just a flat out presentation from a slanted point of view. And just let folks come in and talk. Those that are the news makers, the ones that you all see on a regular basis or talk to, or at least reach out to, and do that unfiltered. Everybody's going to have their different perspectives and points of view. I mean, that's nothing that can disappear, particularly today. And there was a reference earlier to the various networks. I go back with CBS. We've been affiliated with them for longer than the family has owned the stations. And I remember, Edward R. Murrow and the Murrow Boys. Okay, no adverbs, no adjectives, just facts. That, I think, disappeared with Paul Harvey, Dan Rather, even to a certain extent, Walter Cronkite, back in the late 60s and early 70s. So to think that that is a goal, while it may be laudable, I don't know if it's ever really achievable, because it does depend on what somebody says, and then what the individual who's reporting it, what their personal perspectives and experiences have been also. I mean, Thad, you go back probably as long as most. You have some of the history and some of the different stories and different challenges that happened, whether it was Redwood Summer and some of the things that were said and who said them at that point, or some of the more current stuff. And that's got to influence one's perspectives. If it doesn't, then we are losing something that's called experience. Joe, the same thing with you, up in the valley. I mean, if you're not using some of that experience, the inefficiencies are just so huge. It makes it so difficult to get some of that stuff done. Whether or not you can report all sides of the story, I really don't know if that's our challenge anymore. I think it's to report what we do present as thoroughly as possible. How do you get that last 10 or 15%? That starts getting into resource allocation, and how much does the consumer really benefit from those last little tidbits? Perhaps an awful lot, perhaps not so much so. But that's kind of the beauty of having so many outlets now in the area, is that there are different points of views, and everybody has their favorites, their go-tos, I guess is the current phrase, that people will reference. And whether it's television or radio or digital or print or whatever it might be, heaven forbid, even going in person themselves and attending meetings. And that's one of the things that I've seen that has kind of dissipated over the years, is oftentimes those that attend meetings are so fervent in their position that you really don't get a lot of dialogue, even to outbursts from the audience in public meetings, clapping and yelling or trying to yell somebody down. And that stuff didn't happen a long time ago, but now everybody seems to be so empowered, or feeling as if they are empowered, that it makes it more challenging, I think, certainly for the news makers and the news contacts that I see each day. It's a bone of contention for an awful lot of situations. So it's a new world, I guess, and a new approach. Even the Zoom meeting, doing it this way instead of being in the studio like we've done in the past years, makes a difference. Just because the nonverbal is so much of what we do, and done a little bit of reading about this with the kids and the education, and not being able to go to school and stuff for the last couple of years. It does influence how the message is received, and it's unfortunate because a lot of times we fill in with what we think is right rather than what might be accurate. So I don't know, I guess that's a little bit of a long-winded response for the opportunity, but there I am.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad you got to join us. So we heard a lot about challenges. We heard a lot about the landscape that we work in. I'm wondering what called you to this work? How did you end up here? How do you, keep your glass full while continuing, this mad dash of media lifestyle?
Well, I can kick that one off. Grew up here, grew about four blocks away. I consider it a genetic weakness, but I wouldn't do anything any other way. I mean, this is my hometown. This is what makes the area so special, and it's something that there's almost a calling for to me, and why we want to stay here. I think there have been plenty of opportunities to leave, but this is home, and as goofy as a lot of things are out there right now, I don't want to give up on Eureka. I don't want to give up on Humboldt County. So I guess I'm a lifer.
Yeah, second to that. I've always loved radio, and I think that I also feel really strongly about Humboldt being home and feeling like it feels really good to kind of have your hand on the pulse and get to, give. I think that by being a part of a platform, you're giving so many other people the platform, which is really a special thing to get to do, to get to allow people who otherwise wouldn't have a platform to get to, share their message along with my own and whatever I would like to do. So yeah.
So I'm it's kind of the family business for me. My stepfather worked at the Washington Post for 20 years. And then I got into it after a couple of jobs after college. And 20 years went by, and I ended up working for Hearst Media and some other big papers around the country. I had a connection to Humboldt through my biological father, who had been here for many years. And so I knew about this place and how special it was. And when an opportunity to come run a local media company presented itself, I pounced on it, because after visiting Humboldt once, I realized that I'd never seen anywhere in my travels that was as beautiful or as perfect. And I still feel pretty damn lucky to ended up here. To the question of why I continue on in this business, to be 100% honest, newspaper industry, as everybody knows, is in dire straits these days. I mean, it's ironic. We have more readers than we've ever had online, but the online revenues are much smaller than the print revenues, and we're still adjusting our business model to catch up. The trick is maintaining profitability, so we can, so we can stay true to the mission. It's a challenge. It's the hardest job I've ever had. And I think, because the fight matters more now than it ever has. There's too much fake news. There's too much opinion dressed up to look like the news. There are many people out there, who either don't know, or they're frankly too busy just trying to get by to really care about how the powerful are taking advantage of the rest of us. And that's getting worse. It's not getting better. So, without a very robust fourth estate, they'll get away with more than they already have. So I stay because I believe what my old paper, the Washington Post, has across their masthead, which is democracy dies in darkness. And I stay to keep the lights on. That's my short and sweet answer there.
Well, what brought me to journalism was kind of a circuitous route, but I grew up in a media-rich household. We subscribed to several newspapers growing up. I grew up watching my parents read newspapers every day, and then reading newspapers myself every day. I believed fervently in kind of their importance. I never really thought about doing it as a profession until I came to Humboldt State, or Cal Poly Humboldt now, and thinking I was going to be an English teacher, and I took a general education intro to journalism class and really liked it, and then spent a semester writing for the school paper and fell in love with it, and just kind of instantly knew this is what I wanted to do. What keeps me in it is twofold, honestly. The first is that journalism is a lot of fun. Like H.L. Mencken said, the life of kings. I mean, it's I get paid to talk to really interesting, passionate people every day and tell their stories, and find important things of importance to our community and tell them about it. It's every day is different and every day is fun. On a much, I think, higher calling level, as John was saying, I believe fervently in the power of newspapers and the importance of verified information, and it's what role it plays in a democracy, and what role watchdogs play in a democracy. And I love Humboldt County. I love this community. It's my home. It's my family's home, and I like to think of journalism as my way of giving back to that, of supporting it and kind of nurturing this community.
I'll go. But I think how I got into journalism was through the back door somewhere. Way back when I was working in a factory, they were trying to get a union started, and I thought, well, yeah, we deserve more pay and better regulations and stuff. So I start writing these little notes of my thoughts of why we needed this union. And I start pasting them up on the employees' bulletin board. There's like 400 employees there. And the management would come down, and somebody from human resources would walk by there and see that note. And I always put them in the same corner. So they always looked at that corner. And so I was watching them do this, and they take them down. And so then I thought, aha, I'll move to this corner. And every time they come by that bulletin board, they look up at that corner, but they missed it. It was down here in this corner. I thought, wow, this became kind of like a game to me. I started moving this around. And then I went to college because the people I started working with were all going to community colleges. And I thought, gee, I was always been a laborer. And I thought, why don't I start using my mind a little bit more? So I went to college. They had a newspaper, but I never joined them. But I always wrote letters to the editor. It was called My Turn. That's what they had that column called. And so I would start talking about things that are happening in the campus and how this campus had gray walls. I thought, geez, it's kind of like inside of a factory. So why don't they put some pictures and stuff? Well, some of the faculty said, caught that and read that and invited me to lunch. And they said, well, this is a brand new campus. We have these ideas. We're going to be doing this. So they tell me about this stuff. And I thought that was kind of fun. So I just kept on writing more My Turn articles. And I found out the journalism teacher wanted me to take his class. A friend of mine told me, says, no, you don't want to be a journalist because you go into his class and they're going to change the way you write. And I said, okay. So they did a survey. The journalism class did a survey about what is the most read article in their newspaper. And at that time, the student body named my articles, my editorials, as the number one. And I thought, wow, that's something. So then I left there and I came to Hoopa, came back home. And I had, in the summer before that, I was doing in this camp. I was talking with this fellow, and he was going to this other DQ of Native American College in Davis, and he was trying to help them build a 10-watt radio station. So he was talking radio all the time, radio. He's going to these meetings, the radio, and tell me all about it. So then I come home, and who did I run into? The same fellow. I said, what are you doing here? He says, your education committee contracted with me to build them a 10-watt radio station. I'm going to a meeting. Come with me. So I go with them. When they said, "Oh, a tribal member's interested in radio. You're on our radio committee." So I said, "Okay." So I'm on the radio committee. So then he says, "I'm going to Fresno to the National Federation of Community Broadcasters. I have this regional meeting, and come along with me and find out about what this radio stuff's about." So I go down there, and this is a non-commercial educational radio system, National Federation of Community Broadcasters. And they were talking all kinds of things, acronyms, NPR, or NFCB, NPAG, all these things. And they told me, don't worry about not knowing what we're talking about. Just ask any of us a question and we'll answer it for you. And by golly, they did. And I had been involved at that time with Department of Labor, Department of Education, Department of, Labor said that. And I've gone to their conferences and everybody was like holding on to their information. They wouldn't share anything with us, but these radio people, open book. I go, wow, these are pretty neat people. So then I start understanding what this whole concept of non-commercial education radio is about. And I thought, wow, this is a missing element. We need this in Hoopa. This we could learn a lot and bring the outside world into us and share and analyze it and share it, and then also tell good stories about ourselves to ourselves, because at that time, back in the 70s, we were getting a lot of bad press. Anything that happened bad, it happened in Hoopa. And that's the only stories you ever heard. So, but all of the good stuff, nobody heard it. So we need a system that will allow us to tell our own good stories to one another. And that's what this whole radio station was primarily meant to do. So now, as I've been in this field for 40 years, I come to thinking, and well, about a couple decades ago, I thought, how did we get this? Why do we have radio? What is this tool? And why is it important that natives have radio? Because we didn't get radio until ownership of radio until 1972. Those are the first two native-owned radio stations in 72. And we didn't come on until 1980. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? And then when I tried to expand our broadcast range outside of this valley, I found out, well, I can't do that because there's already licensed radio stations near our frequency that I couldn't intrude on. So we got boxed in, and we are still boxed in. And I got to thinking about that. That's not right. Who in the FCC created this broadcast frequency range contour thing? And how come they didn't ask us about our rights to airspace? They just created this whole system over us. They gave us water rights, hunting rights, and fishing rights, but what they essentially did is take away our communication rights. So that's a challenge that I've been working on for the past couple of decades. I'm still working on that. And that's what drives me right now, is that, as I mentioned earlier, there's only two of us in this county. KEID and Two Rivers Tribune are tribally owned, but then that's also a complication on us because Freedom of Information Act, we should be independent, not under the thumb of the Tribal Council, or not under the influence of the Tribal Council. There's a whole new system has to be developed, and that's what I'd really like to talk with Deb Haaland and Senator Warren about, and some other key people, is how do we create a system where the federal government says, the missing responsibility, trust responsibility that exists is communication systems for tribes. Because we should have it. Like I said earlier, there's only 6 native tribal radio stations in California, but how many tribes are there in California? And how many tribes are there in the United States? How come there's only 66 native radio stations in the whole country? How many non-native radio stations and newspapers are there in the whole country. We have to somehow reach some level of parity, where people are tuning into us and reading our stories and wanting to do that, not just because we're available, but they want to do that. So yeah, like I said, we only started in 1972 and we've been playing catch up ever since. And it seems like it's getting further and further away, just like the economy is getting further and further away. And so that's what drives me. That's what keeps me going. So even after I retire from working for the Hupa Valley Tribe at this radio station, I'm still going to be quite involved with Native media across the board now, because there's a missing element. Where I are definitely a missing voice in all of this. So that keeps me driving. Thank you.
I don't think I'm jumping on anybody's time. I really did everything I could to not end up in journalism, and like here I am. Thad earlier, now that he's gone, I can say it's lies. It's not fun every single day. It's frequently terrible. I spent a lot of time like ugly crying, especially in the past couple of years. There has been a lot of mascara lost to just the constant onslaught of horrible news. I am actually from upstate New York originally, and I spent time, I went to school in California and then ended up going back to New York City. My husband and I lived in Tokyo for 10 years and had our kids there. And then he's from Eureka. So I married into Humboldt, like so many people, and ended up back here. And as it turns out, having worked in publishing and been a writer and been editing and working with other writers and at a university in a writing program, it was kind of a weird natural transition from freelancing for the journal to elbowing my way into the building and squatting until I was permanent there. And it turns out now that I am not fit for anything else. And partly because I cannot imagine a place where I would work with better people or with a better purpose. Certainly imagining higher pay and better conditions is very easy. But it is, it's deeply rewarding. And working with people who are really passionate about what they're doing, being able to, as Thad said, interview all kinds of people and meet all kinds of people and better understand what's going on in our county, better understand what's going on in our culture in general, and being able to amplify the voices of people who don't get to, be heard all the time has been really rewarding. And I do some of our fluffier content, like our magazines, like the Menu of Menus and the Insider. And those are actually really like a refresh where you get to just like write about places for really wonderful French fries or something. And then at the same time, I get to do all kinds of things at the journal and all kinds of stories, some of them more intense, some of them lighter. I get to shout my opinion at people and be shouted at in turn. And like I said, I just don't know that I'm fit for anything else now. And I imagine that I'm not alone in that. But I think one of the things that is good is there's lots of room for improvement, and making the journal better with the team that we've got has been, has really been a motivating thing, and especially over the pandemic, really seeing how everybody dug deep. It's hard to slack off, and it's hard to take a break when you see everybody else just grinding away and doing so much and being so dedicated. So, you know, I think part of what gives me motivation to keep going and the motivation to do the best work I can is just honestly the shame of doing worse than my very incredible team.
Thank you for sharing. I love hearing these stories, especially, you know, for the folks that have been doing this for so long. Our landscape changes so quickly, and how we share information has changed so quickly. It's kind of incredible watching just how technology has advanced, you know, through the 90s till now. So I can only imagine how much change has happened if you are, you know, relaying news or creating media for consumption. We maybe have 2 more questions, but I guess I'll do this one first, just in case there isn't time. We want to have a little bit of time for folks to talk with each other, if that's what they're feeling. So I'm wondering, what direction do you see the North Coast media landscape heading, and what do you think the future has in store?
I think, well, I realized also as I was listening to all of you tell your stories about how you came to be, that I didn't actually say that, so I'll do that really quick. I grew up also around radio. My dad worked at KHSU for many, many years, and I used to go on his show a lot. So I kind of grew up around radio and loving radio here in Humboldt. And then I went to college at UC Santa Cruz, and I studied I worked at KZSC, which is a student station there, for all 4 years, which is really definitely what mostly shaped my love for radio. And then I graduated and moved back here to Arcata. I graduated in 2019. And I got involved with the Playhouse. I always was kind of involved with the Playhouse, so I got back involved, and then they were starting this thing called Humboldt Hot Air, and I joined in because Jackie had known that I had done radio and been interested in that. So now doing Humboldt Hot Air. So that's that. And then it was what do we see as in the future of media on the North Coast, Mo? Is that what that was?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is kind of an obvious answer, but I think it's really interesting to be part of an internet radio station, because I think that the future is very digital. And a lot of people are always asking us when we're going to become an FM station. And it's something that I am definitely interested in. And I think that would be awesome if Humboldt Hot Air went in that direction. But I also am always reminding people that I think we are at a moment right now where internet radio is going to become more relevant, and we're kind of at a turning point in that way. And I think that sometimes I want to say, well, slow down and let's see kind of where internet radio takes us as itself and not as an FM station. So I think that there's a lot of potential in online streaming. And I think that actually COVID kind of kickstarted that too, because here we are streaming concerts, we're streaming things, streaming all sorts of different types of things all the time. And I think that kind of has helped people put streaming on their radar as a platform for a lot of different things. And I think that's kind of why Humboldt Hot Air has gotten the support it has, is that people are seeing online streams as something of value. So yeah, that's definitely a strong thing that I see in the future of media on the North Coast.
I'll pile on to the digitization, though. When I was running the radio stations for Lost Coast Communications, I was very new to radio, and I was sort of shocked that we had radio at all still. I mean, what was the point? I was in charge of business operations, among other things, and I'm sure Brian can back me up here. It cost $10,000 to change a damn light bulb in radio. It's very, very expensive. TV is even more expensive. Why weren't we just doing everything online? And what I learned very quickly And one of the things I love about this place is that Humboldtians are particular about the way they like to imbibe their media. I catch a lot of flack at the newspaper because one of the reasons I was brought on was to shepherd us into the digital age, into the 100% digital age. But a huge core of our readers, would never give up print if they had the choice, no matter how much it cost. So I think that the future of media in Humboldt County will be very similar to its present for quite some time. It will be a kind of a weird hybrid because of how particular we are, and because we've got this fantastic population of 135,000 very different people who all want what they want. You're going to have people getting all of their news and information over these and only that. But you're also going to have people reading newspapers and magazines. You're going to have people listening to internet radio, but you're also going to have people tuning into KINS like they always have. There will be a slow, steady push more toward digitization, I think, especially as we get better internet access, possibly through swarming satellites, things like that, that allow people who are farther out into the hills to have easier and cheaper access to it. But yeah, I think it'll be a very good long time before the traditional quote unquote medias are replaced entirely by digital.
Well, what I see, kind of piggybacking on what John was, traditional media, while there are challenges, certainly right now, commercial or broadcast TV is having a tough go, as is cable. The whole cutting the cable is a big deal. But to defend radio just for a sec, there was a threat that was perceived by many that traditional radio was going to die in 55 when this thing called television came on. And then we were going to die when FM came on. And then we were going to die when 8-tracks and cassettes and John smiling. I mean, you've heard this one before. The resiliency of what radio is extraordinary. When my grandfather was on Madison Avenue, he was involved with jingle writing. Okay, that area that he had expertise in was cigarettes. He wrote the Winston jingle, outlawed in '71 because it was too effective. Okay, and some of the other things that have been found over the years, as we look at the local area, I'm more bullish now than what Dad was, and he was very much of an optimist, and my grandfather was when he bought here. I think our overall is dependent on the local economy. And when we tanked after the timber industry took its hits, and then the marijuana industry kind of bridged it a little bit. Now they're going through their challenges. But we've got 4 very strong economic growth areas that are going to be happening in the next little bit. And does that mean we're all going to be fat, dumb, and happy? I don't think so. Does it mean that we're going to be able to be more viable and more vital in the future? Unless there's something out there I don't see. I mean, every industry, and I see each media as a separate industry, has their own challenges. For us, it's artist rights fees, and a number of other things, as John alluded to. We lose a light bulb at a transmitter site. Yeah, it's about $500-600 for me to have somebody go out there who knows what they're doing and change the light bulb, or to change a tube inside of a transmitter. Okay, but that's always been the case. These challenges are always there. So I think that there's just an innate challenge. And if this was a discussion about media in general, rather than just the news divisions of each, I think the conversation would be wildly different because of some of these costs and the business side of it. Joe kind of touched on a little bit also about challenge to get access and that's something that's always been there. And it doesn't matter what the format is or what the license says, it's always been a challenge. When KEID started, it was a challenge. It still is. Same thing with, well, I guess the version of KHSU that currently exists, it still is. Private sector or privately owned media. certainly is. That's not going to change, but I think the local economy changing is really going to be the thing that's going to allow everybody to flourish as we haven't probably since the 60s, frankly, because there's just been such a proliferation of media. If we put in the present value of money right now, we're selling our commercials at about 45% of what they were when I started in '82. That's not the way to make a living necessarily, but it is what our realities are, and we've all had to adjust because of it. Right? COVID was referenced earlier. Okay, some of the challenges in media consumption have changed. That's true also. A lot of things are going on out there, but I think the future is as robust as what it could possibly be.
All right, did everyone go? Jen, did you go?
No, but I guess I will address the content side of it. I think that what I see changing partly is readership. I think that Humboldt County is a changing landscape, and its population is changing, and you know, their concerns, their interests, everything from their hobbies and entertainments, which, you know, as the arts and features person, that's a big deal for me. Those things change when the population changes. And it's one of the reasons I'm very interested in Humboldt Hot Air. It's, you know, a new piece of media that is starting fresh with, you know, partly what with demand, but also with what kind of younger, more diverse groups of contributors are coming up with in terms of content. And it's interesting to be in a paper that's certainly by no means old, although now that the Journal has bought the Ferndale Enterprise, it's a big difference between a, you know, 145-year-old paper versus a 30-year-old paper. We're like in, you know, we're in like newspaper midlife, I think, at the Journal. And, you know, the shift in Humboldt's culture, I think, is going to be a big determinant of in what the news looks like. The, you know, discussion of what, you know, we often think about the golden age of media and, you know, the sort of romanticized early newsmen, and they were men, being, you know, the thing that we hold up as our, you know, the icons, what we should aspire to. But things are different now, and people are very savvy. They are getting their information from a zillion different sources. A lot of times what they want is a kind of analysis or a kind of curating of the vast amounts of information that are coming at them. The appetite seems to be endless, but the overwhelm is also an issue for our readers. More people are, as John pointed out, reading on mobile devices. In Humboldt, they do seem to want to have both. And I think it's worth noting that advertisers feel that, you know, print is an effective form of advertising, that radio is an effective form of advertising, and that's where their customers and our readers are responding, that's where they're meeting us. And so I think it's going to be about, you know, adjusting to a changing population, a shifting culture, and also shifting reading habits, different ways that people consume their news and their media, and, you know, what they want. It's changing. If we were still, you know, just sticking to what the Journal was doing 30 years ago, they wouldn't fly. And likewise, you know, although I don't know, maybe we could do what we did 145 years ago in Ferndale, and now probably not. But it's been it's been interesting to, with those two publications, kind of running those side by side in the past months, to really think about how both populations are shifting, the county at large and the Eel River Valley as a portion, and they are shifting. And I'm curious to see what it will be. I know better than to make a hard prediction about it, but those are the things that are on my mind when I think about the future of Humboldt County's media landscape. Oh, and I'm sorry that El Leñador isn't here, because I'm very interested in what they're doing, and they're all sort of young and energetic, and I was hoping to sap some energy off of them.
Well, what I see, I think I see anyway, the future of media in Humboldt County is I agree, it's basically going to stay, the format's going to stay. I feel that radio and newspaper are the backbone still. However, to shake up media, it's still radio and newspaper are the backbones of the whole thing. And I don't think anybody's ever going to do away with it. How it's a matter of influence that we have within our audiences. Somebody was saying that what our station could do would really be helpful because we are so inundated by media. We're very good consumers of media and kind of weaker owners of media. But one thing that we could do is start framing the stories that everybody is knowing about. People are, and I'm talking to an high school English teacher said this to us, is that the students are more aware because of social media of a lot that's going on, but they're not as knowledgeable about those things. So what we could do is help frame those stories for them. And then think, well, okay, that you got a point there. And I also agree with probably bringing in at some point internet radio and internet connections. We just now have Acorn Wireless as a tribally owned nonprofit business that is available here in our community. It's brand new. And eventually we'll be able to get our television networks through this internet system because we relying on translators from KEID TV and KIEM to bring in terrestrial transmitter signals here. But eventually they're going to be coming over the internet as well through our systems. And that's going to help us out a lot. So we're going to have to start using that internet system far greater than, well, now that we have the opportunity to do that, we're just waiting for the full deployment of the system yet. So I'm thinking, once I'm exiting out on this analog as far as being in radio, but I'm thinking, well, I could also transition over to internet radio. And somebody had asked me if I was going to do that, somebody from a Pacifica station. And I hadn't really thought about that, but now listening to Humboldt Hot Air, I thought, there's an angle there. I just got to find out more about that. So, yeah, there's so much to know. And there's the more that we understand, the better we are at communicating. And I kind of go back and forth with that as far as they go hand in hand. And the more that we can do that, I think it's far important because it's going to solve a lot of the problems that we have. And that's why I was Like when we first started this radio station, the reason why we did it is because we were getting a lot of bad press. Well, there was a lack of communication that was going on. There's a lack of understanding that was going on. There's too much conflict that was still happening, and that was the only thing, the only story that was being told. So we need to tell a deeper story, and we had to create some deeper listening in order that we can uh, provide that information and that framework. And the other reason why we need radio is because people are very mobile. You can't be watching a video or reading a newspaper while you're driving. So that's the biggest audience that we have for radio, is the mobility of the population. So yes, during drive time, we have to dedicate that drive time to consolidate and start that framework of what is happening in the world, and what is happening in the world and how does that affect us. That's the backbone of why we have to have this radio station for this community, is to explain to the people of how this is going to affect us and what you can do about it to help it affect us in a better way. So media is vital. It's the backbone of everything we do. It's our consciousness. Thank you.
Yes, thank all of you for having this conversation with us. I agree that radio will live in Humboldt forever, because you always have to drive somewhere far with no service, cell phone service. So you need the radio stations on those long drives.